Hi, I am Amelia for Riches, and this is my Tort Liability Module 14 presentation. To begin, what is tort liability? Black's Dictionary defines it as a civil wrong for which a remedy may be obtained, usually in the form of damages. More or less, it is a civil wrong that causes someone else to suffer loss or harm. There is intentional tort, which can be battery, assault, and trespassing. There is also negligent tort, which can be injury, breach of contract, or more or less unintentionally not doing a job correctly. The first court case that I'm going to talk about is Frame versus Comex. In this court case, it involved an 8th grader and a substitute teacher. The sub gave a spelling test because that was what they were left to do, and the student became defiant, and the sub teacher had to get after them several times, and eventually the teacher had to physically go over, grab the student's arm, and remove them from the classroom. Well, as a result, the student fell, ran into the blackboard, and the substitute teacher was sued then for assault and battery. The court ruled that the teacher did what was necessary and ruled in favor of the substitute teacher because they did what they had to do to conduct class. First off, I think it is definitely important to try and be more proactive in situations rather than reactive. However, being reactive in this situation would mean communicating with your staff. Let them know what the issue is and how you are dealing with it and how to best deal with it. Then it needs to be clear what the expectations and the procedures are for student behavior, such as Frames in this court case. If there needs to be new adjustments put in place, I would then do that. To be proactive, one must be prepared for situations such as this. Teachers must hypothetically prepare for the worst case scenarios. In my district, we practice responsibility-centered discipline, or RCD. That is how we learn to handle all different types of defiant students, and we even do like role play situations, and it seems maybe slightly ridiculous, but it does help you prepare for those situations if and when they ever do arise. Also, creating an environment where that is just not the norm and it is not tolerated, that's really important, because if students know that, you're just going to have less issues. Professional ethics. When it comes down to it, I believe that adult behavior is more important than student behavior. Ultimately, the adult or the teacher in this situation must respond appropriately. We can't control the students, we can only react to them. And so when it comes down to it, it is the teacher or the adult's job to make sure that they are responding appropriately. The next case that we're going to look at is Flanagan versus Canton. In this court case, Flanagan was a 5th grade student who had gotten in an altercation with another student during a PE class. The teacher had got after the students who were involved and then eventually sent the students to the locker room to change. In the meantime, the teacher had been outside of the locker room talking to another student about a different situation. In the meantime, those students who had originally been in the argument got into another altercation, and it resulted in the student, Flanagan, being pushed and then having to have an operation, an emergency operation, and then the parents then sued the teacher. The court ruled in favor of the student, agreeing that the teacher was negligent because the teacher should have been present and should have foreseen this to potentially happen. How to deal with this, how to be reactive, would be, once again, to communicate with the teachers, let them know what was going on. I just think communication is extremely important in situations like this. I would also implement or heighten the current bullying policy. To be proactive, I would have the locker room expectations very high and very clear from day one. I would also set very firm and understood consequences for locker room misconduct and be sure that the PE teachers are aware that they need to be doing this. Professional ethics. It is a teacher's duty to be aware of their students and keep them safe. They must pay attention to detail and be sure that the students who have tension between them are monitored extra to protect themselves and to protect the students. Another court case we're going to look at is Begin versus Georgia Championship Wrestling Incorporated. This one's a little bit different. It involves safety. In Georgia, in the Begin versus Georgia, a wrestling event was being held at a school. A spectator was hurt due to a broken part on the wooden gym floor, and the spectator then sued the school for the injury that he suffered. In actuality, it was not the school who was liable for the injury, but it was the sponsors of the wrestling event. Therefore, the school was not sued, but the sponsors were. To be reactive in this situation, I would be in contact with the sponsors of the event. I would then look into investing to fix the equipment or the facilities to prevent future injuries. Maybe we weren't responsible, but to protect ourselves, I would definitely be fixing anything that needs fixed. I would also be very aware of other schools and venues that my school might be using to host events in the future, so we know how to protect ourselves as well. To be proactive, I would be sure to monitor and maintain our facilities and equipment at all times. Be talking to maintenance and be aware of what needs work. I would also be sure that the sponsors are aware that they are liable in certain cases. If somebody's going to host something at our school, they need to be aware of the fact that they are potentially and most likely liable for situations. Ethically, from an ethical standpoint, I would like to take pride in taking care of my school. While maybe the school is not liable, one should care for their stuff and keep it in check because that situation could have happened during school hours and it could have just as likely had been a student. Another court case here is Fischler versus Students. Defamation is involved here. A male teacher sued female students, and it was for the students had been lying and falsely speaking about the teacher, had said that he had been peeping in locker rooms, been touching the girls inappropriately, spreading these false rumors, and trying to ultimately get the teacher in trouble. The court actually ruled in the teacher's favor, and the teacher then was allotted, compensated several $1,000s in damages as a result of this court case. To be reactive in this situation, students must protect themselves. In this case, the teacher did not get in trouble and did not do anything wrong, but they just must be aware of their surroundings and their situations to make sure that they have appropriate relationships with students and know how to conduct time with them. To be proactive, teachers must behave professionally and model appropriate behavior. They must model appropriate behavior with students, with each others as teachers, and school leadership must also model good behavior. That's just how you do that. You set that tone, and teachers need to be responsible for that. Professional ethics, once again, as I talked about in the very first court case, adult behavior is more important than student behavior. Adults must be responsible for their actions. And then the last court case here is Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community Schools. In Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids, a special education teacher and a student who were on an IEP were those involved with this case. The student on the IEP had had conversations about being in a relationship with another student. The student had been missing class fairly frequently, and eventually the student got on a bus that they were not supposed to and were sexually assaulted. The family of the student on the IEP ended up suing the school for being negligent, and the court ruled in the favor of the parents, the family, for being negligent. To be, as a result of this situation in Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community Schools, I would make actions to create more awareness of sexual harassment and sexual assault, especially in a high school setting. Students must be educated and must be aware of these things. We can't act like they don't happen. I would also make teachers just really enforce that they are monitoring their students tightly and are aware of where they're going, where they're headed, and where they've been. And to be more proactive, I would have teachers, they're having conversations with students, they're hearing conversations, they're creating relationships with them, and if and when there is concern, they must report any concerns to parents, to guardians, to the counselor, to the principal, if they feel like that is necessary. They must be proactive in doing that. And when it comes down to it, student safety is ultimately the most important thing. That has to come first before you can educate students, and so that has to be at the forefront of their minds. So thank you for watching.